Here we go.
Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me how. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, let's do it now. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, you're the one that makes fishing so much fun. Well, I woke up this morning and I so much.
Holy cow, what am I doing here? I'm losing control already. Hello everybody, Bob Lusk here, the Pond Boss, checking in from world headquarters of Pond Boss Magazine and Bob Lusk Outdoors, right here beside the burgeoning, well, I can see it, metropolitan Gordonville, Texas area, not far from Lake Texoma. Glad you guys are here. Let's get some things cranking here in a minute. Of course, you know the way I like to start off. I'd like for everybody to click like on this broadcast, share it, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section, and that's gonna get you in there for a drawing for a Pond Boss cap, which we got in this week. We have Pond Boss caps, brand new ones, just hot off the presses, and we've got the coffee mugs as well. And this week's winner, or last week's winner, is Troy Todd. So, Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year for good stuff. I see Anthony Abate, Victor Moberg, Todd Austin, Hey, Troy Todd, you won, dude. You got a cap and a mug coming at you this next week. Congratulations, man. Thanks for tuning in. Dick Tabbert got his magazine and his fish poster today. Jason Nepstad's on board. That's great. $35 a year for this magazine is well worth it. Well worth it. There it is, Pond Boss. There's the latest issue. By the way, hey, there's Jason Luster. Hey, Jason. Good to see you, man. Nicole Marie, LaMonica, Todd Austin. Everybody, you know what? You guys are just cranking in here. I'm going to see if I can get it to come up on my laptop so I can see everybody. It's kind of hard to read it on that phone that we broadcast from. You know, tonight I thought I'd just kind of open it up to questions, but I do kind of have a backup plan. If we don't get a lot of questions, just save me from having to use the backup plan. Let's go. Get me some good stuff going on here. Here we go. I found it. All right. Click to enlarge, which I'm doing. Let's see here. All Aquatics. Kevin Briggs. Kevin, we're going to talk about your question here in a minute. Let's see here. It won't let me see who joined before that. Outstanding. Tori Rhodes. Dave Glover. Dave, let's talk tomorrow. I got a couple things going, but let's figure out a good time. Benjamin Garrett Mayfield. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. That's right. And, you know, just to do a little brief review, there's all kinds of resources available for pond owners around the world, actually, with Pond Boss Magazine. Now, we do our focus on recreational fishing ponds. That's what we do. You know, we can talk about backyard water gardens, but we're not that good at it. We're more attuned to your fishing lake, your fishing ponds, and how to make fish grow, healthy water, managing plants, habitat, food chain, all those cool things. Pondboss.com, got some good free videos. As a matter of fact, all these videos are linked to YouTube from our website, as well as having them on this Facebook page as well. We've also got an Ask the Boss forum, outstanding. That thing's been cranking since 2002. A lot of great information on that forum. The magazine is what fuels the economy of Pond Boss, so we can have all this other free stuff. So $35 a year is well worth it. Our resource guide is out as well. These are vendors that we have vetted. I know almost all of them personally. This is my 39th year as a private fisheries biologist, and you get to know a lot of people during that span of time. Anthony Abate, good evening. Good evening. Let's see here. Jacob West is on board. That's good. That's good. That's great. info@pondboss.com if you want to email. 800-687-6075. That's our graphic for the day. All right, start throwing me a few questions. Let's get at it. All Aquatics loves the music. Isn't that folksy, cute? Yep. Yeah, if I had a sound guy or somebody that knows more about this than me, where I could just think about fish and talk about fish, the music would be even more fun. Let's see here. All right, throw me some questions. Let's go. My pond is the clearest I've seen it in 15 years, says Dick Tabbert. That's good. You know, really, my attitude over clear water has changed over the years. You know, years ago, of course, I was raised in the aquaculture side of fisheries management, which is more about fish production. So that's my background and my passion. I love to grow big, big fish. You know, the thing about clear water, it's akin to sterile water if you're trying to grow a lot of baby fish. Well, when the fish food started to improve 10 or 15 years ago, things changed. My attitudes about clear water started to change. I'm actually embracing several ponds that have clear water because I think we can make up the nutritional deficit to some extent with fish food. Now, it costs a little bit. You know, a bag of good fish food is $45 or $50. But what you get out of that bag is pretty beneficial. So we are working to have clearer waters. And then not so much because I don't like fertile water. I like fertile water. The problem in today's world is the more eutrophic a pond or lake gets, the more likely it is to have a nutritional imbalance in the water column itself, which means you end up with more blue-green algae and planktonic algae and things that don't really benefit fish. Steve Lewis from Hot Springs, Arkansas. Good to see you. Dion Myers, Colin Pearson, you guys are figuring this out. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Share the video. I want you to share the video. We're trying to build the audience here. Get it going. Let's see. Benjamin Garrett Mayfield says, Bob, what would your recommendation be for growing massive bullgills? You know, I tell you, up until about 8 or 10 years ago, I figured the best you're going to be able to do, the best I could see, best I can do was about 1.25 pounds to 1.5 pounds bluegills. But now there's several really important tips to be able to grow some big, big bluegills. Number one is they have to live long enough and they have a short lifespan. 6 to 8 years is about it for most bluegills in most waters. Now, that changes a little bit when you go north, but doesn't change a lot. Maybe 8 to 10 years in some of the northern states. The thing you got to remember about any fish, bluegill especially, is if they miss a meal, it's kind of hard to make it up. Now, they can if they get more than enough food within 3 or 4 days. But if they miss a meal every day for 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, they can't make that up. They've only got so many heartbeats, so long of a lifespan. So most fish that don't get big, listen to this, this is pretty cool. Most of the fish that don't get big, it's nutritional. It's not so much genetics. A lot of fish have the genes to get to be larger sizes. They just get the opportunity. If they don't get the opportunity, they don't get the right amount of food, or they get eaten by another fish. You know, you can grow some really big bluegills, but here's what you got to have. You got to have overcrowded largemouth bass in most cases. Now, every trophy largemouth bass lake that we manage has big bluegill as well. So the best way to get more big bluegills is if you have an overcrowded bass population and you're feeding your bluegills. And, you know, traditional thought is don't feed them in the winter. Feed them if they'll eat. You know, the part of the way we grew some 3-pound monster bluegills, 14 inches long, that looked like they smacked into the back of an 18-wheeler, was by feeding them in the wintertime at Richmond Mill Lake over in North Carolina. So good nutrition, fish meal-based protein is what I believe in. And don't let them get overcrowded. That's why you want them in an overcrowded bass lake. Overcrowded bass will not allow bluegill to overcrowd. Fewer individuals are going to get bigger. That sounds good there. Let's see. Anthony Abate, the town I work for, maintains a 40-acre retention lake. Maximum depth 25 feet. Completely windswept and very turbid water. Every few years we have a massive gizzard shad die-off. All sizes and age classes. Immediately following the shad die-off, ducks begin to show signs of paralysis and eventually die within a few days. DNR says it's caused by botulism. I'm not buying it. What do you think? Well, I'm going to think about that in a minute, but I'll tell you why the gizzard shad die. Gizzard shad, if there's not a predator in there to eat the gizzard shad, they will overcrowd themselves to the point that they'll starve to death. Now, I don't know about botulism because I'm not a microbiologist, but I'm not going to completely blow off that theory. You know, I can't think of, there's got to be something happening to those decaying gizzard shad if ducks are eating them, which that's not typically because ducks don't eat, most ducks don't eat dead fish. They just don't. So I don't know, there may be a parallel. If there is, I don't know what it is. But what I do know is the gizzard shad die because they get too crowded. When they get too crowded, they give off a pheromone that inhibits reproduction. Then they get to the point that they're so crowded that they die. They don't get enough food. Now, gizzard shad, keep in mind about gizzard shad. When they're little bitty fish, I talked about this last week, but when they're real small, they're filter feeders. They're collecting things out of the water, filtering it through their gills, through their gill rakers, and funneling it down their throat, and that's how they eat. Now, as they get a little larger, they start going to the bottom, looking for shallow water, and they feed in muddy water. They're called a gizzard shad because they have a gizzard. So they'll start eating little bitty crustaceans, mussels, red worms, all kinds of whatever's the benthic organisms that are living above the thermocline in the mud. They're going to eat that. So I can't blow off the botulism question, and I can't answer it. I don't know that. My gut feeling is that could be correct. Jason Nipstead says, what are your thoughts on tagging fish by cutting off part of a fin, say the lower portion of the tail fin? Well, I'll tell you what I've done in the past, Jason. I've used a hole punch and punched a hole in the tail of a fish to mark it. Now, mark and recapture, you got to figure out why you want to do this. So the reason to punch a hole in a tail fin, I don't think you want to cut off much of the tail fin because that's what they use to navigate and, their thrust through the water and that sort of thing. But when you use the hole punch and you punch a hole in it, it'll heal right back and there'll be a knot, just a little bit smaller than the hole was of the hole punch. Now, if you're going to fin clip the pelvic fins. Now, if you're going to tag a few or mark a few this year and then do a few next year, do the left fin this year and the right fin next year. That way, when you recover your fish, you can tell. Now, what happens when you clip a pelvic fin, you clip it off, it will heal back, but it'll be crooked. And you can see a line. Now, the fin will most likely grow back to the full length, but it will be deformed looking. That's how you can tell. Now, if you really do want to do a mark recapture study, look at tagging some fish. That way you can identify that individual, judge its lengths and weights, see how it's growing, as well as the regular reasons for mark recapture. Now, here's the reason for marking and recapturing. If you're going to poke a hole in the fin, clip a fin, the main thing you want to try to do there is, let's say that you have a great day and you catch 50 fish and you decide to fin clip all 50. Then you release them back in the lake. Then you come back in a week and you catch 50 more fish, and 10 of them have fin clips. So you fin clip the rest. Now you got 90 that are fin clipped. The next week you come back and you catch 50 more. 25 of them have fin clips, 25 don't. Now you're getting to the point where you're getting some data where you can begin to judge the numbers of fish that you've got. Now, what the fin clips won't let you do is judge the characteristics of the overall population of fish unless you're weighing and measuring every fish that you're clipping the fin, which I would do that. Now, if you tag the fish, now you've got individual records on each fish, and then you can not only learn about the population, because if you've tagged 100 fish and you catch 100 fish and 10 are tagged, and you do that consistently, you have 1,000 fish in there. So now you can begin to judge the individual fish and the population as a whole. Tori Rhodes, I missed the live aeration session. I have 3 ponds less than 1 acre, depth average 6 feet. Should I use Vertex diffuser or a Keaton surface aerator? I have both available for use. I'd use both. And I'll tell you why. They serve different purposes. The bottom diffuser creates a current that's vertical, and it makes that water move almost like a mushroom. So you're taking water from the bottom, continually moving it to the top. That Keaton surface aerator is moving water at the top, and it's directional. So if you want to aim it in a certain direction, you can create horizontal currents. So that's the difference. So if you want to use, I'd use both of them. They serve 2 different purposes. So one of the things to remember about aeration is that you got to decide the reason you want to aerate, and then you pick the right one. We've got one client that I've written about, Ron Morgan, who has dammed up 3 or 4 spots in a small creek, and there's continually water flowing over his little weirs. He likes to kick on some circulators for horizontal movement to attract fish to come up so he can catch them easier and to keep his water moving. So he's got a bunch of different purposes. Jacob West, we're building a pond 12 to 13 acres, depth adverse, that must be a typo, depth 18 feet. We expect the water level to fluctuate 6 feet. What water level depth do you recommend structure? Looking forward to having you back out soon. I'm ready to come out and take a look at what you're doing there, Jacob. Okay, here's the best answer. You need to choose your habitat based on the fact that you're going to have 6 feet of fluctuation. So you want it at different elevations. You know, if you were going to stay at a constant level, I would tell you to have the majority of your habitat in water 5 to 8 feet deep, knowing that you're going to have some water 18 feet deep. It's probably going to average 10. So if you've got most of your habitat in 5 to 8 feet of water, that's going to be good. Now, if we have a lake that drops 6 feet and my wife sees stuff sticking out of it, she ain't going to be happy about that. So what I'm going to tell you is to create some spawning beds at different levels. If you know it's going to drop that much, have a little bit more, have a really good 3-to-1 slope so you don't lose surface area as it drops. Depth is going to be important. But the majority of your cover, you're going to want to be in water 5 to 8 feet deep. So if that's the case that you're going to drop 6 feet, which I'm where you are, I'm confident you will, then I would be sure to have some down in water 12, 13 feet deep as well. All right, Anthony Abate, thanks, and I'll try to get some more info on what's killing the ducks. You know, I don't know if it's a bad thing that the ducks die because they reproduce a lot. You know, of course, I may get a little pushback on that, but I don't care. Reggie Dearman, should I use fertilizer to darken my pond or something else? It's about 1 acre, 3 to 8 feet deep, clear water, and I keep it filled with well water. Reggie, you know, I think that's going to depend on your mission and where you are. If you're, look at there, Gato Ventura stepped into the fracas here. Gato, glad to see you, man. Reggie, on fertilization, on the reason to fertilize, there's 2 good reasons. One is to create the base of the food chain for newly hatched baby fish. The second reason is to minimize sunlight's penetration to the bottom. If those 2 things are important to your goals, then I'd suggest you fertilize. Now, if you're in the northern part of the country, we need to talk about it. It's a little bit different. Okay, you're in Mississippi. Yeah, I would say fertilize. If you've got crystal clear water and fish production is a big deal for you, since you're in Mississippi, your odds skyrocket that you're going to get unmanageable aquatic plants in the summertime. So I'd say, yeah, get it fertile. You bet. Jason Nepstad, wish I could catch 50 to 100 bass per trip. Yeah, you live on a 130-acre lake, dude. Yeah, I know. You know, okay, let's change those numbers. Let's go to 10. I hear what you're saying. We got a question in the email inbox today that I wanted to address. It's pretty good. This is Clint Loveday, who found these broadcasts. He's watched every one of them. Here's what he says. I would first like to say I have asked 10 people the same questions. I've gotten 10 different answers when it comes to pond management. You know, that's the truth, because that's just the nature of this beast. But here's the good news. If you ask 10 people that know what they're doing and you get 10 different answers, they're all correct. Now, my advice on that little first part of this thing is pick somebody you believe in and work with them. And then once you kind of get your legs under you or your swim fins and you start to get a good feel for what you're doing, you're going to gain some confidence. You know, now the problem with confidence is just when you think you know what you're doing, you figure out you don't, because there's always a learning curve and you don't know what you don't know. So find somebody you're confident in and work with them. So here's what he says. I found the pond boss and I'm sticking with the boss come hell or high water. Well, yeah, is that a left-handed compliment? I'll take it. Thank you for all the info and knowledge I've already got from watching all your Wednesday videos in the Pond Boss Forum. I have an 8/10 acre pond with a maximum depth 16 feet, average depth of 7 feet, 3-to-1 slope. So now he goes in and tells me all the goodies about his pond in the Cumberland Plateau in Grandview, Tennessee. Let's see. So he's got bluffs and valleys. He's got some a little bit of structure and cover. He's added lime. Let's see, would love to grow some big bluegill for sport fish and table fare. He's purchased Texas Hunter feeder. Good choice. You know, Texas Hunter is one of our sponsors for this broadcast, as is Purina Mills. If you want to feed really, really good fish food, use Purina Mills fish food. Aquamax. They've got a product now called MVP that's perfect for bluegill. And if you want to grow big bluegill, I would use that food. Texas Hunter products, sponsoring this broadcast, they have outstanding feeders as well. Looks like Andy Benson joined in. Andy is he's our mossback fish habitat guy. Glad to see you, Andy. Old Mo Liner, old Jim Liner. I got your email today. I'll respond to it tomorrow, buddy. I've been on the road today. So going back to Clint's question, he says, we're feeding Purina gamefish chow because I wanted to see them eating the floating food. Is there a great benefit in changing to Aquamax or Optimal? For money difference, I'm not opposed. It's just not easy to find it near me. Okay, I'm a big fan of Purina. Optimal, I've never used it. I can't testify about it. Don't know anything about it other than I've met the people that have developed it. The gamefish chow is a grain-based fish food. So one of the keys here you've said is that you want to grow big bluegill. I'd switch feeds. Now, you're going to have a little sticker shock when you pay $45 for a bag of food compared to $28 or whatever gamefish chow is. But when you see the difference in growth rates and aggressiveness in their feeding, you're going to be glad you did it because the conversion rates are really, really good. Let's see here. Knowing that we have a rock scene packed under clay, would you stock crawfish? No. If you're going to get crawfish, they'll show up. And besides, stocking some crawfish that are invasive, not a good plan. So don't do it. Today I subscribed to Pond Boss. Good idea. Thank you very much. Let's see. He says, unfortunately, I found the Pond Boss after I ordered my fish. I've had a management company tell me I should do a total fish kill because I should have never mixed hybrid bluegill and native bluegill. I'm not interested in that, just looking for a best way to manage. They also told me the channel cat will eat 80% of my fish food. I see this as an easy fix by feeding more. Okay, here's the deal on that. Hybrid bluegill don't reproduce a lot. They're aggressive feeders. Their lifespans, just like most sunfish, not very long, 6 to 8 years. They serve a totally different purpose than bluegill. I would never go out and kill a pond full of fish just because I had hybrids and native bluegills. Now, they may cross, but that's not a bad thing either, especially if you've got largemouth bass. And something else, when your channel catfish get bigger, they're going to feed on those bluegill as well. So there you go. That's he's sent me some pictures of his pond, and I'll take a look at all that here when I get a few minutes and respond to it. Let's see here. Let's see. John Taskett says, on a prior broadcast, you casually mentioned working to develop dragonfly habitat. I would love to hear more. Okay, sure. John, the dragonflies eat mosquitoes. That's one of my favorite things about them. Their habitat, what we do typically is we get up in the water that's fairly shallow, say 6 inches down to 1.5 to 2 feet, and we'll put basketball, softball size rock, riprap in there. And then what happens is algae starts to grow on the surfaces of that rock, and we'll put some wood in there too, some limbs, some logs, things like that. And those little dragonfly nymphs will feed on that detritus, they'll feed on that periphyton, they'll feed on that algae, and they'll grow really, really, really well. And then you'll get more of them because they can have a place to hide. Of course, if you're growing fish, dragonfly nymphs are just highly sought after by all the game fish. So they got to have a place to hide, and they have to have a place to eat. So I would put them there. Let's see. Colin Pearson, be nice to ducks, Bob. I love ducks. They reproduce so much, that losing a few, But I'm with you. I do. I love ducks. I bet we've got 10 wood duck boxes up. And if we didn't have a great Pyrenees that goes out every morning, we'd probably have a flock of mallards on a couple of our ponds every day. Billy Wolf. Hey, Billy. How you doing, local buddy? Jerry Oler. Good to see you. Al Cahutek from Lake Vilbig. We're getting a pretty good following from Lake Vilbig. Steve Snow, my longtime high school buddy from Lake Graham, is on board. Let's see. Al Cahutek, put a link up there for us. Mark Wyman, good evening. Good to see you, Mark. What is the expected lifespan of yellow perch? You know what? I don't know, but I'm going to give you a guess. Since they're so prolific, I'm going to guess that they don't have a very long lifespan either. I think they're probably going to be living around, probably about like sunfish do, 6 to 8 years, maybe 10 years. That's my guess. I'd have to go look that up. I don't know. Dave Davidson. Holy cow, good to see you, Dave, from Hurst, Euless, Bedford. And Margot with Purina Mills. She's stepping in here. Good to see you, Margot. Dave Davidson also is a moderator on the Pond Boss Forum. Go to pondboss.com, click on Ask the Boss, and you will see Dave Davidson chiming in every day. I don't think he sleeps. He's on there sometimes at 3:30 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning. He's always the first one up, and he has got lots and lots of years behind him of working with his private waters, his own ponds near Bowie, Texas. So he's very, very knowledgeable. One of the go-to guys on the Pond Boss Forum. Jason Nepstad, we have over 40 geese living in our lake. Is that bad for the water? Well, if I remember right, you have a 130-acre lake. And you know, I'm going to say this a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but 40 geese, for every pound they eat, they give off about 6 pounds of poop. You know, so 40 geese is going to add a lot of fertility to the water. You know, it would be better if they weren't there all the time. You know, your water can process a finite amount of waste. It has to. That's what water does. That's why we have sewer treatment plants. That's why we have water treatment plants to drink our water. You know, there's not too many cities in America that isn't drinking somebody else's wastewater. Think about that. You know, water's got a great ability to cleanse itself, but if you put more waste in it than it can cleanse in a reasonable period of time, you're asking for a pushback. And that usually is with a fish kill or algae blooms or blue-green algae. Steve Snow says, Richard Kruger's coming up. Richard used to live around the corner from us. I think he lived on Keeter, and I lived on Ashmore when I was a teenager and going through school. Tell him hello. Tori Rhodes, I would like to add a few lily plants into a pond in Missouri. How do I keep them from taking over? Choose a strain that doesn't do that. Hey, Mike Rivers, good to see you, buddy. Hope things are good over there in your part of the country, Tennessee area. The thing about lily pads is a number of them are invasive and some are not. You know, if you choose fragrant white water lilies, especially in Missouri, the biggest advantage you've got is a little bit shorter growing season than we have here in Texas or areas further south. But why don't you visit with some of the water garden people in your neck of the woods and find some that are less invasive. But I love to see water lilies, but American lotus, fragrant water, white water lilies, they're invasive. They'll take over a lot. Chris Piper, I'm using Sportsman's Choice trophy fish food, watching them eat it right now. Should I change feeds for my bluegill? Pond has bass and bluegill. Change feeds if it isn't working. Weigh and measure some fish. Look at your growth rates. If your bluegills have thick shoulders, you know, if they're thick across the back, you know, and their bellies are distended pretty well, and they've got, Bruce Condello came up with the term a helmet. If they've got a big round spot on the top of their heads, then your feed's working. If they're thin, and you know what? I have a table, if you want it, I can find it that can give you the relative weight. Just go online and do that. You can find relative weights of bluegills and compare yours to that. And if they're not gaining weight above that, then you need to change feeds. Jason Hoffman, I hate geese, haha. We have 70 plus at times in an acre. Oh, Lord, you don't have a fish pond, dude. You have a goose pond. That's way, way, way too many. Timothy Phillips joined up. Lindsay Backshees, that's my daughter. Hi, Lenny. Good to see you, honey. Okay, let's see. Kevin Briggs sent a question in the other day. And Kevin, help me because I'm going off of memory. His question was, I have too many catfish. I can't catch them. What do I need to do to get rid of some? And part of the problem is they're feeding on his other fish. And he's got some catfish that are up to over 30 inches long, 36 inches long. So, good gosh, you know, here's the thing to know about channel catfish. Channel catfish can live up to 20 years, and they can keep growing up until the point that they start to die. You know, so here's Kevin chiming in. He says, you're right, they're hard to catch. Here's what happens with channel catfish. And I learned this. I had a little fee fishing operation for a while where I'd put some catfish in on like a Thursday and then have people come catch them on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, pay by the pound. Never were more than half those fish caught. Ever. Only half of them would even bite a hook. So then on Monday, I'd go in, seine those fish out, haul them, the remaining fish, haul them, sell them to some grocery stores. I was near Houston at that time, and I would sell them into some grocery stores at Houston, then get another load. Did that probably for a year and a half while I was cutting my teeth on managing ponds and lakes. And there are not very many fish species where you can expect all the fish to bite a hook. So what happens with channel cat is when you start fishing for them and you start catching them, there's going to be those that just won't bite a hook. They just won't. Now, they'll come to eat fish food, and if you catch one, you're lucky. But what I was telling Kevin he should do is, the question was, I think, how to build a trap. Well, I've gone through that a little bit. I'll just give you the Cliff's Notes right now. You can buy some hoop nets and bait them with the fish food that the catfish eat and catch them like that. There's Greg Grimes. Hey, Greg, good to see you, man. Sean Lingawi is in. Let's see. Mark Wyman says, you need a big dog, Jason, that swims and likes goose for dinner. I like that idea. That works pretty good. But going back to the catfish equation, a 10-pound channel cat is a predator. It's going to eat 5, 6, 7-inch long bluegill. It's going to eat 8-inch bass. It's going to eat whatever it can catch. Kevin said in his email or his message to me that he stood there and watched a big catfish come and eat a bass off of a nest. I can see that happening. I believe that. I have stocked fish into a pond where I didn't know there were catfish, come back and drain the pond and find 5 big catfish and about 10% of the fish that we'd stocked originally. So their top line, even people think that channel catfish are bottom feeders. They're not. They're just mostly nocturnal. So that makes them go to the bottom. But you can catch them on a lure. You can catch them on a crankbait. So trying to catch them. Now, if you know they're feeding on bluegill or feeding on small bass, I'd be tempted to put a couple of jug lines out or a trout line and bait it with my bait fish. Go catch a few bluegill, put them on a hook. Catch a little bass, put it on a hook. Don't do that in public waters because you can't use game fish for bait, but in your private waters you can. Let's see here. Jacob West says, is there anything you can do to prevent intrusion of unwanted species into your pond? Yeah, you kind of can. You kind of can't. Keep in mind that most fish are introduced by swimming in. So when you build your spillway, have some part of it where the water drops off where fish can't swim up over the spillway, because you will have a flood event. And that's when most fish move. Okay, let's see. Greg Grimes, howdy, listening while I'm driving. Keep me awake, please. What do you want me to do, sing? Hey, man, love to talk to you. Well, I'll catch up with you here before long, Greg. But going back to the unwanted species, the best way to keep unwanted species from taking over a pond, and a classic example is green sunfish. Even though they're not that bad, you don't want them in the beginning. So what we do, as soon as the pond has got enough water in it that it can support fish, we stock it. So we want to overwhelm it with the fish we want so they can outcompete whatever handful of invasive fish show up in there. Now, if you have carp coming up, they're almost always coming upstream. Same thing with garb. They come in a flood. So you have to isolate your pond some way to prevent them from swimming in. On some occasions, fish will swim down from upstream. Now they'll do that some, especially the little bitty ones. A grass carp will go downstream. So trying to keep fish coming upstream is your best bet. And then stock it well enough that you can overwhelm any invasive fish with the fish you want. Okay, let's see here. Sean says, is there such thing as too many turtles? I love that question. Turtles kind of get a bad rap, in my opinion, and they get a bad rap because they're so visible. If you've got a lot of turtles, probably the biggest, there's two problems with turtles, if we want to call it a problem. One is they're going to eat your fish food. I mean, they look like little submarines coming over, and when that feeder goes off, they're there like clockwork. They will eat a lot of your fish food. The other thing is they will invade a nest. A bass has a hard time nudging a 40-pound snapping turtle or even a 10-pound old red-eared slider or something. So they do invade nests. But what I tell people is if a turtle eats a fish, the fish deserved it. The fish deserved it, because fish are quick enough to not get eaten by turtles. So turtles don't disrupt a fish population, but they can disrupt your enjoyment. Show them their Second Amendment rights or trap some. Let's see here. Jason Hoffman says, bullheads, they're taking over. The reason that the bullheads are taken over is because there's nothing in there to eat them. That's the bad news. The good news is they don't live long. A 2.5-year-old bullhead is an ancient bullhead. So what that tells me is that you've got the perfect habitat for bullheads if you have bullheads. Now, if you've got a good, well-managed fishing lake, then the odds of bullheads taking over plummet, because they're just like any other forage fish. You know, when they're in those little black clouds and they're that long and you can see them swimming everywhere all over the pond, bass are feeding on those just as heavily as they'll feed on anything else. So if you've got a good, well-balanced fishery, bullheads aren't going to take over. They take over when there's a fishery that isn't in balance. So let's see here. Todd Watts is on board from Hurricane, West Virginia. Hey, Todd. You need to read about Todd's story. He's in the latest Pond Boss magazine as well. $35 a year. Less money for a year's worth of great information than you spend taking your lady out on Friday night. I'm telling you. Let's see. Ben Strange. My friends just bought a place in Central Texas. The pond they have is 1 acre. They want to make it a fishing pond with big catfish and big bass. Is this possible to do in a pond this size? No. I tell you what is possible. It's possible to grow quite a few big catfish and 1 or 2 big bass. So if in a pond that's 1 acre, I'd lean more toward the catfish. And if they catch a big bass, congratulations. And I would probably feed the fish. Matter of fact, I know I would. If you want to try to grow in a 1 acre pond, 25 to 30 big catfish, when I say like channel cat up to 10 or 12 pounds, then they're going to need to be fed. And if you can grow 2 big bass on a 1 acre pond, even without catfish, you've done really, really well. 1 acre is not quite big enough to grow giant bass. You can grow 1 or 2, and that's about it. Todd Watts just reminded me, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. We've got some new viewers on since I said this the last time. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section. Click like and share this on your timeline. We want to try to grow the audience. I'm going to keep doing this on Wednesday nights as long as the audience grows. If it doesn't grow, then I'm probably going to back it off and do it once every 2 weeks or once a month. So if you guys like it, share it, please. Okay, so Colin Pearson says, 3/4 acre bottom diffused aeration pond in South Dakota. Perch is the main goal. I would love to have 20 trout for kids to catch. In your opinion, is this even an option? I'm hell or high water with your opinion as well. Yes, it's possible. You bet it is. Now, here's the thing about bottom diffused aeration. And this is going to sound a little bit contrary to the common thought. That bottom diffused aeration in South Dakota, in my opinion, its function is to clean the water all year long so your fish don't die during winter. I don't think keeping your aeration system going in the wintertime is beneficial unless you pull it up in really, really shallow water and keep a hole open in water less than 3 feet deep. Now, you know, there's many, many reasons not to aerate in the wintertime. One is safety. Number 2 is when in South Dakota, when you've got that big thick layer of ice, then your bottom water is going to stay 40 degrees. And fish, even cold water fish, don't like water cold. You know, cold to a cold water fish is 45 degrees to 60 degrees. That's what cold water fish like yellow perch. As a matter of fact, you know, the yellow perch, I think that's a good idea. And I like the trout idea because they can help control the numbers of the yellow perch. I don't know if you've got any other fish in there or not, but if you don't, having some trout in there that you feed through the course of the fall. Now, what I would do if I were there, I would be checking your water temperatures through the course of the summer. And if it's cool enough in the summer, which it may be, it may not, it depends on the pond, even with aeration, I'd stock them. And if it's not, I'd wait. I'd put them in when it starts to cool off. Mike Rivers, what is the proper way to design a spillway in ponds less than an acre? That's a great question, Mike Rivers. The spillway design is based on the watershed size. So if you've got a 1 acre pond or a 100 acre pond, you need to know the size of the watershed that's going to feed that pond. That tells you how big the spillway needs to be. Your spillway needs to accommodate at least a 100-year flood. Now, a 100-year flood doesn't mean you're going to get that rainfall every 100 years. Because I've seen 100-year floods in the same place 3 years back to back. All it means is that's a 1 in 100 chance of getting that amount of rainfall on that watershed. So calculate how big your watershed is. know what your rainfall is through the course of a year, and then you can calculate how big. That becomes a math and engineering problem. Here's a simpler answer. If you've got a 50-acre watershed feeding into a 1-acre pond, and your average annual rainfall there in Tennessee is 60 inches, 50 acres times 60 inches is 300 acre inches times 27,000 gallons per acre inch. So listen to this. This is your number. 1 acre, 1 inch deep is 27,000 gallons. So you got to have a spillway, and here's another key. You don't want your emergency spillway flowing any deeper than about 6 inches. So the way that you manage that is the width. Also, you don't want your spillway to dump into the backside of the dam. You want it to dump downstream of the dam, because when you get that flood and it comes down over that spillway, that water gains momentum as it rolls. If it circles around, it can start eating the backside of your dam away, and then you're going to have issues after 5 or 6 floods. We're going to have to bring in heavy equipment. So design it right in the beginning. Okay, let's see here. John Kinney. Can you outfish bluegills from a 5-acre pond? What size to eat and what should I throw back? Oh, that's a great question. I love that, John. Can you outfish bluegills? Probably not. Now, I'm going to qualify that statement just a little bit. If you've got a gazillion bass and they're overcrowded, underweight, they'll outfish your bluegills. You'll just help them do it. But if you've got a well-balanced pond, you're not likely to outfish your bluegills. Now, or overfish the bluegills. To give yourself a few rules. If you want to take up to 100 bluegill per acre through the course of a year, no problem. Spread it out over the course of a year. Now, don't take your biggest bluegills. Your biggest bluegills are the ones that are going to defend the nest and force the younger bluegills to get bigger. Because when a bluegill starts to turn its attention to reproducing, its growth rates plummet. So earlier in this broadcast, I talked about good habitat, good food, an overcrowded bass fishery to grow big bluegills. Well, you also got to manage their numbers, and you got to let them live long enough, and you got to keep all these different things in mind as well. Don't catch the biggest ones out, because if they start reproducing, their growth rates slow down. So what you want to do there is, if you've got your biggest bluegill are 8 to 9 inches long, eat some 5 to 6 inch bluegills. Nothing wrong with that. Now, the remaining bluegill that you don't catch are going to grow up and get bigger than those bluegill that are defending the nest now that only live 6 to 8 years. Remember that. Because you got to have recruitment. You got to have young ones coming up into the junior high team, the high school team, the JV team, all the way up into the NCAA to get to the NFL. And only a handful of them are going to get to the NFL in your pond. So part of what you can do is make sure you got enough food, that you don't let them overcrowd, and that you don't let them begin to reproduce too quick. So you use the biggest bluegill for that. So how many do you want to take out? 100 per acre is probably a good number, spread out over the course of a season. Or when I say season, that's from the 1st of March until after Thanksgiving. So if you have a 1-acre pond, you want to take out 100, there's nothing wrong with that. All right, you bet. Let's see. Throw me some more questions here. Some of the common questions we get is, my fish aren't growing. What do I do about it? Another question we get is, we have way too much moss. What do we do about it? And the turtle question is a common question. My pond is muddy. How do I fix it? Another question we get all the time is, I have a leaky pond. How do I fix that? You guys pitch a few questions at me. I'm going to circle back and tackle the one about my fish not growing well. Fish don't grow well because they don't have enough food. The reason they don't have enough food usually is either they weren't stocked in there or they've overeaten the food chain. So the way that you change that is you be sure that the cafeteria is open and there's not too many mouths crowding through the door to feed at the cafeteria. So you got to have a harvest plan as well. And if you'll do that, then your fish will start to grow again. Jack Hamilton, hey Bob, hey Jack, good to see you, man. Let's see here. On the other fish that won't grow, like channel catfish, there's times I'll get, I don't know what kind of pictures people text you, but I got a picture of a tapeworm this Saturday. One of our clients caught about a 14-inch bass, put it in a bucket because he's culling it, And he said that he called me on the phone and then texted me the picture. He said, man, I picked up this bass. I looked in the bucket and there's this big long worm wiggling around that came out of that bass. And I said, whoa, can you send me a picture? He did. And I promise you, that was a 16-inch long tapeworm that came out of that 14-inch bass. Now, the way it got there is those parasites are transferred from pond to pond, typically by birds, especially cormorants, because cormorants will eat it, digest it, it's not spores, but it's larvae, and taken in by the fish, and then it grows inside the fish and feeds off. What a tapeworm does in fish, just like people, it feeds off of what you eat. So whatever that fish is eating, that tapeworm is eating it. And that's what's growing. That's what's causing the tapeworm to grow. So the fish doesn't get a whole lot of benefit from the food that a tapeworm eats. Now, what can you do about it? Nothing. But they'll pass. Oh, Lord, that was a pun. Please forgive me. That was kind of yucky. Hey, Robert, good to see you, man. So whenever fish aren't growing, it's almost typically because they don't have enough food. They don't have the right kind of habitat. They're overcrowded. So if you can take away that scenario, then your fish are going to start to thrive. The way that you take, if they're overcrowded, eat some. Take some out. Weigh and measure. Follow their growth patterns. If they're growing down, they're too crowded, feed the fish. Bump up your food chain. If you'll manage those, you're going to start to see things change. Jack Hamilton says, my largemouth bass are starting to eat the MVP fish food. I thought they would not learn that. You must have some hungry fish. It'd be interesting to see what percentage of them, because I've seen a few ponds where a handful of bass will come up and eat that fish food, and once they figure it out, they get it. But typically what happens there is it would be less than 1% of the fish. But you know what? That might be enough for what you got going on. So, heck yeah, keep doing it. Now, one thing you want to do once you have some bass eating that MVP, get some bigger pellets. Buy these 600. And once those bass hit 12, 13 inches, might even buy a bag of Aquamax largemouth. That pellet's about almost as big as half your thumb. And those big bass that are conditioned to eat fish food love that. Gato Ventura, a celebrity on board with us. In your experience, are pellet feed fish tougher to catch, bluegill for example? And how do you change your tactics when fishing a pond with a feeder? Do you start at the feeder? Okay, here's what I'm going to tell you. I don't necessarily think it's harder to catch fish that are eating fish food because they're typically more aggressive. Now, what's interesting, Gato, is especially with bluegill, if you go against their conditioning, you're not going to be as likely to get a strike. Now, keep in mind that when that feeder goes off, it goes off maybe for 5 seconds, and in an aggressive fed pond, 3 times a day. So it goes off 15 seconds. And those fish consume all that feed in less than a minute. And when that happens, you know you got another 23 hours and so many minutes, 50 minutes, 57 and a half minutes in the day that they're not at that feeder feeding. Now, there'll always be a resident population somewhere near the feeder. And so you've got to, and they're going to be feeding on their natural food anyway, because very, very few ponds that are fed or feed the fish to satiation. They only supplement to them, but it improves their growth rates. That food is free. So, what some guys will do is they'll tie a fly to look like a fish pellet. Some guys will fish small crankbaits to catch giant bluegills in these feed trained ponds. But the way I see it is for a bluegill to get to be 2 pounds, it's got to be 4 or 5 years old. It's conditioned over that 4 or 5 years, not only to eat fish food, but how not to get eaten. So I don't see it a lot different than trying to catch fish in a pond that isn't fed. There's just more of them. So that's going to be the best answer I can give you on that. Dave Davidson, Pond Boss Moderator. Bob, can you discuss fish mortality? What percentage of eggs laid ever become a mature bass or bluegill? I'm going to tell you this. Let's just take bass since you said bass. I'm going to tell you that a bass has less than, I think you and I have a greater chance of getting struck by lightning than a bass egg has to grow to an adult. Adult to me meaning 2.5 or 3 years old. 99% of the eggs that hatch into fry are going to get eaten before that fish gets any bigger than about an inch, inch and a half. And that's nature's way. I mean, you don't want a 10-acre lake where there's 1 million eggs hatched, which literally that can happen. You don't want very many to survive. And nature's goal is to replace the parents. That's their goal. And if they can do that, it's successful. So the numbers are really, really low. John Henry, how big will a fathead minnow get? We stocked them 3 years ago and only have catfish and bluegill. And if our minnows are true fatheads, they're huge. Some reach 5 inches. Fathead minnows, 2.5 inches. That's it. Fathead minnows about that long. 2.5, a 3-inch fathead minnow would be a beast. So if you've got some that are 5 inches, they're not fatheads. And if you've got a pond with catfish and bluegill, and probably doesn't matter where you are, I don't think you can expect fatheads to live much longer than 2 years in a predator pond because they live in the same niche. They're slow moving. They don't get very big. And that's how we use them, knowing that. So what your minnows are not, those are not fathead minnows. And I don't know where you are, but odds are that they're golden shiners or something like that. Sean Lingawi's on his knees, says, please, Bob, don't go down to once a month. I look forward to this all week long. Well, I do too, Sean. So we'll keep rocking and rolling and see what happens, buddy. Chris Brown, have a 4-acre pond that's fed by a small creek. I get a lot of silt. Probably a good 1/4 acre is only a foot deep at its shallowest. Any suggestions for dredging? You know, the dredging is going to depend on the layout of the pond. So your 4 acres, you know, it depends on where you are as well. If that pond can drop down, you know, I'll tell you, I'm going to come at you from a different angle. I'd be tempted to do that during a drought, take that silt out, get it downstream from the dam, and then while the dozer is there or the excavator or whatever you're using to move that silt, I'd be looking to build a dam on the upstream part of your pond and build yourself a silt pond. If you have a silt pond, especially one that's got a valve on it where you can drain the water out of it, you can push that silt out every 5 or 6 years and you can collect it up there and not let it get into your, you know, into your 4-acre lake. You know, that when there's that much silt, to me, there's something going on in the watershed to allow that silt to migrate down that far. And I've seen it. It happens at my house too. Okay, Tori says, suggestions about dredging, Chris. Depends on your situation. You know, American Sport Fish Hatchery, which is a Pond Boss supporter, and I've known those guys forever, they've got a dredge. Matter of fact, they have several dredges where they literally go in, and that's what they'll do is they'll dredge the silt out, pump it out, and do a big sock, let the water drain back in the pond. I think that's more feasible for urban ponds because it's fairly expensive. So it completely depends on your situation, on should you and how would you. Let's see, Tory Rhodes, considering making a fingerling run to Arkansas for hybrid striped bass fingerlings. I read once they reach a large size after being caught in summer, they may die from stress. Absolutely true. They don't like hot. Now, if you want to keep your hybrid stripers alive, I'll tell you real quick how to make an intensive care unit. If you will take a large ice chest, put pond water in it, go to the welding store, get a small bottle of welding oxygen, put a flow meter on it, which look that up. You can find oxygen flow meters, and put a little diffuser down in the bottom of that water. And when you catch a big hybrid striper, they will fight until they die. And they will be so exhausted that they struggle to breathe when it's hot. So I would, and I do this. I'll put them in a live well, or put them in we have a big live well. So we'll put pure oxygen in there and revive them. They'll resuscitate. And then we release them back into the lake. Okay, let's see here. Jack Hamilton, I agree, state once a week. Okay, we'll do that for a while, see what happens. Dave Glover, PhD fisheries biologist, by the way. He and I haven't talked yet, but we're going to. I hope tomorrow. The average fish is a dead fish is one of my favorite sayings. The average fish is a dead fish. You know what? If you dig down into the depth of that statement, that's absolutely true, because If a fish, especially in a wild environment, if it's average, it's going to get eaten. Only the best fish are going to survive in a wild environment. Wild environment being public lakes where there may be 12 different species of predator fish. Just to pitch out a few: flathead catfish, blue catfish, channel catfish, largemouth bass, stripers, hybrid stripers, yellow perch, smallmouth bass. You know, the list goes on. Muskies, northern pike, tiger muskies. When you've got all that, there's not going to be a great chance of survival. Survival rate is minuscule. But if you're managing your pond well enough, your survival rate of especially a bait fish is going to be adequate to support your predator fish. Now, the good news about having a 5 or 6 acre lake or 5 or 6 acre pond is you can manage it by harvest quotas. You know, if you have a 5 acre pond and you can catch 20 pounds of bass per acre, 100 pounds of bass spread out through the course of the year, your bass are going to be a lot less likely to dominate the food chain to the point of extinction. You know, you just got to get to the point where you're willing to eat some fish. Now, the problem comes in is if you've got a 30 acre lake and you got to take 1,000 fish out in the course of a year, that turns into work. You know, and people are a lot less likely to do it. So what we try to do when we're managing lakes for people, and our services are available, by the way, for anybody that wants us, we're happy to see if we can help. The management things is to help the lake help it harvest fish. So we're trying to grow as many bigger fish that we can that can turn around and eat some of those younger fish that don't stand a chance to get much bigger anyway. All right, let's see. Our taxidermist Brendan showed up tonight. Good to see you, man. You must be working late. You got caught up painting clownfish. I love that. Well, if you're a taxidermist and you're painting clownfish, you got a pretty good gig going. Hey, there's Shannon Kane from Sherman, Texas. All right, Dave will be hollering at you. Jason Nebstead, do you think hybrid stripers would do good in a 130 acre lake, maximum depth of 11 feet, around 4 to 5 feet average depth in North Carolina? Absolutely, I do, especially if you got a lot of shad, because that's their natural food. Now, hybrid stripers, you can feed them, but 130 acre lake, it's a little bit tough. I'm trying to think of a better word. It's hard to do a good job feeding hybrid stripers in a 130 acre lake. So as long as you do have gizzards, or you do have shad. Hybrid stripers, now I would stock some that are big enough that they don't get eaten. You know, so some 6 to 8 inch, 8 to 10 inch hybrid stripers would be a good idea. And I tell you what I would do if I were you. Now here's a little inside hint here. There are some hybrid striped bass farms in North Carolina that you can buy them from. The problem is they're growing those fish to sell to the food fish market. They don't know how to handle them. You need to work with somebody that when those fish, see, because here's the process. You got to capture them from the pond, get them in, and not scrape all the slime off, not let them flop forever. Get them in water with oxygen, have an antibiotic and some salt in there to keep them from dehydrating their slime, or let their slime dehydrate so they don't slough it off, because that's their first line of defense. The problem is handling the fish from the grow out pond to your lake. So work with somebody, foster lake management, somebody like that can help you with it. And you said how many? I think I'd start with 10 to the acre in a 130 acre lake, not knowing a thing about your lake. I know if shad are abundant and you start off with 10 hybrid striped bass per acre, and then you promote it around to the population around the lake and everybody knows about it, protects them for a couple of years, you can create a fishery within the fishery that you can have a blast with. And then come back in every few years and replace those that you lose to attrition. So that's the way I would look at that. Holy cow, it's already 7:29. Let's see here. Timothy Phillips, you depressed me by saying you can only grow 1 or 2 big bass in a 1 acre pond. Okay, well I'm gonna be a fish psychologist for a minute there, Timothy Phillips. You can really grow 30, but you got to buy feed trained bass. You got to, and if you want to grow 30 big bass in a 1 acre pond, stock 150 that are already a pound, pound and a quarter, and it's going to cost you some cheese. It's going to cost some money. Those things are $15 to $18 a pound typically. So stock 100 to 150 of them. And then the fish that grow the best are going to be the girls, and keep those in there and start culling the other ones that aren't growing very well. and then you can grow some big bass. But they're going to be totally dependent on fish food. They will overeat your food chain, but you can do it if you want to do it that way. And Kevin Briggs says, don't add catfish. A lot of truth to that. All right, well, hey, 7:30. Thanks for tuning in. I wasn't quite sure how this would rock and roll. Victor Moberg, I'm going to knock this out real quick. What is your idea of a big bass? My idea of a big bass is a bass bigger than 5 pounds, even 4 pounds. 4-pound bass is big enough to help eat your fish that need to be eaten. Dave Glover, would you ever recommend having professionals come in to use electrofishing to reach harvest quotas? Absolutely. Because if you want to reach a harvest quota by hook and line, you're calling your most aggressive fish. So, hey, thanks for tuning in. I'm glad you guys joined us, and we will see you next Wednesday night, 6:30 Central Time. Tell your friends, #pondboss.com. Subscribe to the magazine. Tell everybody about it. Let's grow the audience so we can keep doing this. Adios.